You know how they say hindsight's 20/20? Well, that's exactly how I feel right now, staring at the mess that used to be my life. Name's Jason. Until recently, I was married to this woman, Emily. We'd been together for almost 12 years, high school sweethearts, tied the knot right after college. I thought things were fine. You know, the kind of fine where you're just comfortable. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but hey, what married couple doesn't, right? Lately, though, something had been off. Emily started acting weird. Not that I'm going through a phase kind of weird, but more like I'm hiding something and I don't want you to know weird. You know the drill. Sudden need for privacy on her phone and laptop, more trips with the girls, less interest in, well, us. I shrugged it off at first, figured maybe she was just stressed out from work, or whatever. I mean, she was always a bit dramatic, could turn a stubbed toe into a full-blown ER visit. But then, she started getting cagey about this weekend getaway with her friends, and that set off my alarm bells. I mean, who hides something like that from their husband of 12 years unless they're up to no good? Turns out, I was right to be suspicious. We had this conversation one night that tipped me off. I was heading out on a business trip, one of those long ones where you're gone for a week and barely have time to call home except to say you're still breathing. I wasn't even gone yet, and Emily was practically shoving me out the door. Now, most people would think, oh, maybe she just wants some alone time. But my gut was screaming, nah, something's not right. You could practically see her eyes light up when I mentioned the dates I'd be out of town. That's when I started really paying attention. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Emily was never great at hiding things, and I was starting to see red flags waving all over the place. She was glued to her phone like it was surgically attached, laughing at texts that probably weren't that funny, and avoiding eye contact like a guilty kid caught sneaking cookies. So, I decided to dig a little deeper. Lucky for me, I'm pretty tech-savvy, thanks to years working in IT. Emily thought she was slick, but her password was laughably easy to crack. It was literally our cat's name, Felix. I didn't even have to try. And oh boy, did I hit the jackpot. There they were, messages between her and some guy named Chad. Yeah, you heard that right. Chad. The most stereotypical homewrecker name you could think of. The texts weren't even subtle, cringeworthy pet names like Babe and Honey Bear. But the real kicker was the convo about me. Emily was actually planning to invite Chad over the very night I left for my trip. I read stuff like, I'll be free as soon as Jason's gone. And, we can finally have the whole weekend to ourselves. My blood was boiling, but I wasn't about to blow up just yet. Nope, I wanted to see this all play out on my terms. That's when I cooked up the plan. If Emily wanted to turn our home into her little love nest, she was in for a surprise. While she was out, probably shopping for their romantic rendezvous, I spent the day setting up cameras around the house. I mean, I put them everywhere, the bedroom, the living room, even the kitchen. If she and Chad were gonna have their little meetup, I'd be watching it all live. But that wasn't enough. No, I needed a little extra spice. That's when a devilish idea popped into my head. See, Emily had bought some fancy lingerie for Chad, the kind she hadn't bothered wearing for me in, like, years. So, I took the liberty of spraying some of the hottest pepper extract I could find right onto her panties. Yeah, you read that right. I made sure that when the moment of truth came, she'd be in for a fiery surprise. Cameras in place, pepper sprayed, everything was set. Now, all I had to do was sit back, pretend to leave for my trip, and watch the disaster unfold. So, there I was, sitting in my car at the airport, looking like I was all set for my business trip. Truth was, I had no intention of leaving town. I'd already told work I was taking some personal time off. Not exactly a lie, just a little white lie to give me the time to catch my cheating wife in action. I had the cameras linked to my laptop, ready to stream everything live. Those cameras were discreet, tiny things tucked away in the nooks and crannies of our home. Emily wouldn't suspect a thing. I even left a little note on the kitchen counter, something sweet and innocent like, "Have a great weekend, love you." Classic. The moment of truth came, And just like clockwork, not even an hour after I left, Chad showed up. Classic Chad. He looked exactly like the kind of guy who'd wreck a marriage. Muscle shirt, too much cologne, and that arrogant swagger like he thought he was God's gift to women. I watched as Emily greeted him at the door, her face lighting up like she was in some kind of cheesy romance movie. It made my skin crawl, but I kept my cool. They didn't waste any time. It was like they'd been planning this for weeks. Chad sauntered in, and within minutes they were in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine. The same wine we usually shared on our anniversaries, mind you. Watching them laugh and flirt in my house, at my kitchen table, I had to fight the urge to drive back there and throw Chad out on his ass. But patience, I reminded myself. This was all part of the plan. Things heated up pretty quickly after dinner. They moved to the living room, where they were all over each other. It was disgusting, really, but I stayed glued to my laptop, watching it all unfold. I knew what was coming next, and I couldn't wait. When they finally made their way to the bedroom, our bedroom, Emily slipped into that special lingerie she'd bought for Chad. The one with the pepper-sprayed surprise. Showtime. She did a little twirl for him, looking all smug, and asked, "What do you think?" Chad, the idiot, practically drooled over her. I rolled my eyes. They were about to get exactly what they deserved. They climbed into bed, and within minutes, it happened. Emily started scratching. At first, just a casual little itch, but soon it turned into full-on panic. She was clawing at herself, her face turning red and sweaty. "What's happening?" she shrieked, running to the bathroom. I watched with pure satisfaction as Chad sat there, looking bewildered. Emily was in the bathroom for a good 20 minutes, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Meanwhile, Chad just sat on the bed, scratching his head, wondering why his romantic night had gone up in flames. Serves them both right. I could barely contain my laughter as I watched the chaos unfold. Emily came stumbling out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, pacing back and forth, cursing under her breath, while Chad just sat there looking confused. "I don't know what's wrong. It's like I'm on fire," she snapped at him, like it was somehow his fault. Chad, proving just how clueless he really was, mumbled, Maybe it's an allergic reaction or something." He looked like he had no idea what to do with himself. I'm guessing he didn't sign up for his romantic evening to involve a woman frantically clawing at her skin. Emily tried to calm down, but it was useless. She made a half-hearted attempt to kiss him again, probably trying to salvage the evening, but every time he touched her, she winced. They tried to push through it, but the more she scratched, the worse it got. Chad was getting annoyed too. "Should we just, I don't know, stop?" he asked, clearly realizing the night wasn't going as planned. No, I can do this," Emily insisted, her pride clearly wounded. She was determined to make it happen, even though her skin looked like it had been dipped in hot lava. I leaned back, sipping my drink as I watched them fall apart. This was better than any reality show I could have imagined. Eventually, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She stormed into the bathroom again, slamming the door behind her. Chad, now visibly irritated, got out of bed, grabbing his clothes. He paced around for a bit, probably debating if sticking around was worth it. He called through the door. "Do you need anything?" Her muffled voice came from inside the bathroom. "No, just go home." That was all he needed to hear. He didn't waste any time pulling on his shirt and leaving. I watched as he walked out, not even bothering to look back. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. Emily had planned this whole weekend to be some romantic getaway, and now she was left alone, red and itchy, while Chad was probably halfway home, regretting ever meeting her. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. I knew when Emily came out of that bathroom, she'd be humiliated, furious, and looking for someone to blame. And that's when I'd make my next move. The moment Chad walked out of the house, leaving Emily to stew in her misery, I knew it was go time. I had been watching from the safety of my little hideout, well, technically just a cheap motel down the road. Now that their so-called romantic evening had gone up in flames, I figured it was the perfect time to make my grand reappearance. I drove home, heart pounding but laser-focused. Emily had no clue I was about to walk through that door. The thought of her standing there, humiliated and itchy, was the cherry on top of this disastrous Sunday. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car parked awkwardly, door slightly ajar. It was like she had stormed out earlier in frustration. Good. I walked into the house calmly, closing the door behind me with a deliberate bang. I wanted her to know I was home. Sure enough, I heard her footsteps racing down the stairs. She froze when she saw me standing in the hallway, suitcase in hand, like I had just gotten back from my trip. Jason? What are you doing here? She stammered, her face still flushed and her skin far from its usual glow. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to stew in the awkward silence for a bit, let her mind race. Finally I spoke. Came home early. What the hell happened to you? I asked, my voice cold, almost amused. I watched as she squirmed under my gaze, scratching her arm nervously. I don't know. I think I'm having some sort of allergic reaction. She lied, her voice shaky, eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an escape route. Allergic reaction, huh? I nodded, playing along. Funny timing for that, don't you think? Her eyes narrowed as if she was starting to realize something was off. Jason, why are you looking at me like that? And there it was, the moment of truth. I let out a small, cold laugh. Oh, Emily. I know exactly what's going on. You really think I didn't notice the sudden change in your behavior? Hiding your phone, making up excuses? You thought you could just have your little fling while I was away on a business trip, and I wouldn't notice? Her face went pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Chad. I cut straight to the point. The guy who just left, looking like he regretted ever stepping foot in here. I know everything, Emily. I've been watching the whole time. Her eyes widened in pure panic. Watching? What do you mean, watching? She stammered. I smirked. Cameras, sweetheart. I've got cameras all over this house. I watched you and Chad from the moment he walked in until he bolted out the door. And by the way, I hope you enjoyed that little surprise I left for you in your lingerie. Looked like it burned a bit, didn't it? Her mouth fell open in shock, completely speechless. You did this? She stuttered. Damn right I did, I said, stepping closer to her. You thought you could get away with this? Sneaking your lover into our house while I was gone? You think I'm that stupid? She started to cry, the kind of crocodile tears that used to work on me in the past. Jason, I can explain. It wasn't like that. Oh, save it, Emily. I cut her off. I've got the texts, the emails, the footage. You can't weasel your way out of this one. You were planning to spend the weekend with him, weren't you? Right here, in our home, in our bed. It didn't mean anything. She sobbed, collapsing onto the couch like some tragic heroine. It just happened, Jason. It didn't mean anything. Oh, it didn't mean anything? I scoffed. Funny, because you seemed pretty into it when you were prancing around in that new lingerie you bought for him. You don't even wear stuff like that for me anymore. She sobbed harder, clutching her head in her hands. Please, Jason, we can work through this. I was confused. I made a mistake. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling nothing but cold anger. A mistake? No, Emily. A mistake is forgetting to pay the electricity bill. You planned this. You invited him here the second I was out the door. You wanted this. She didn't know what to say. She was speechless, and honestly, I was done hearing her lies. It was time for the final blow. You know what, Emily? I said, my voice calm but firm. I could have handled a lot of things. But cheating? Bringing another man into our house, our bed? That's unforgivable. I pulled out a manila envelope from my suitcase and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. Those are divorce papers. Sign them and get out of my house. Her eyes widened in horror. Divorce? No, Jason, we can work through this. We can fix it. No, we can't, I replied, my voice as cold as ice. You threw away everything we had for a guy like Chad. You chose him over me, and now you get to live with the consequences. Get out, Emily. Or I'll throw your stuff out onto the lawn. She looked at me like she didn't believe what she was hearing, but I wasn't budging. I was done. I was more than done. The woman I thought I knew was gone, and I wasn't sticking around for whatever this version of her had become. Emily sat there, staring at the divorce papers like they were some alien object that had just appeared out of nowhere. Her tears were flowing, but I wasn't falling for that act anymore. Jason, please, she whimpered, trying to compose herself. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. This doesn't have to end like this. I shook my head, feeling that cold, detached sense of finality in my chest. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat. There's no fixing this. Not now. Not after everything you've done. Her face contorted in desperation, but I could see she was still trying to figure out how to talk her way out of this. Emily wasn't just upset about losing me, she was starting to realize she might actually lose everything: the house, the stability, the life we had built together. And deep down, she knew it was all her fault. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. I love you, Jason. I'll do anything. I was stupid, I know. I don't even know why I did it. Chad, he doesn't mean anything to me. It was just... I don't know what I was thinking. It was a mistake. I couldn't help but scoff at that. A mistake? A mistake is spilling coffee on the couch. What you did was deliberate. You planned it, Emily. Don't act like you just slipped up. You've been texting him for weeks behind my back. You invited him over the second I was gone. You were ready to blow up everything for a cheap fling. So don't stand there and pretend this was some accident. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She knew I was right, and no amount of backpedaling was going to change that. You know what really gets me? I said, letting the anger seep into my voice. It's not just that you cheated. It's that you did it here, in our home, in our bed. The place that was supposed to be sacred. You disrespected me on a level I can't even wrap my head around. And you thought you could just get away with it. Emily's tears dried up as she realized I wasn't going to give in. Her face hardened, and I could see her switching to defense mode. Fine, she snapped, her voice losing its pleading tone. I screwed up. I get it. But it's not like you were perfect either, Jason. I raised an eyebrow, amused by the sudden change in her attitude. Oh, so now this is my fault? Go on, enlighten me. She stood up, wiping her face as if she had suddenly gained the strength to fight back. You weren't exactly present, were you? You've been so wrapped up in work for years now, barely paying attention to me. You didn't notice me, you didn't care. I felt like I didn't exist. And yeah, I made a mistake, but maybe if you had actually been there for me, this wouldn't have happened. I stared at her in disbelief. Wow. You've really convinced yourself of that, haven't you? You think that justifies cheating? You think your emotional needs not being met gave you a free pass to blow up our marriage? You could have talked to me, Emily. You could have told me what was going on. But instead, you went behind my back and screwed around with Chad. And now you're trying to make this my fault. She crossed her arms, her face defiant, but I could see the guilt and shame bubbling beneath the surface. I'm not saying it's all your fault. But it wasn't just about Chad. I needed something, and you weren't giving it to me. You're unbelievable, I replied. You want to know why I wasn't there, Emily? Because I was working my ass off to provide for us, for this house, for our future. And while I was doing that, you were off screwing Chad in secret, like a selfish, entitled brat who thought the rules didn't apply to her. She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, defeated, knowing she had lost whatever ground she thought she had. I took a deep breath, realizing there was nothing left to say. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're going to sign those divorce papers. You're going to pack your things and get out. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. This is my house now. Emily's face crumbled again, but I wasn't swayed. I was done with the tears, the excuses, the manipulation. And one more thing, I added, stepping closer to her. I called Chad's wife. Told her everything. Her eyes widened in horror. You what? Yep, I said, enjoying the shock on her face. She knows all about it. How you two planned this little rendezvous, how you betrayed me in our home. She's filing for divorce, too. Looks like you and Chad won't be riding off into the sunset after all. Emily stood there, speechless, her entire world crashing down around her. I could see the realization hitting her that she wasn't just losing me, she was losing everything. Chad wasn't going to stick around now that his life was in ruins. And as for her, she was left with nothing. You ruined everything, she whispered, barely able to get the words out. No, I said coldly. You ruined everything, Emily. You did this. Now live with the consequences. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, broken and alone in the wreckage she had created. I left her standing there, her face frozen in shock, and walked into what used to be our bedroom. The place now felt like a crime scene. I started grabbing things, her clothes, her shoes, anything that reminded me of her, and began stuffing them into garbage bags. This was it. I was purging my life of Emily, one painful memory at a time. Every shirt, every piece of jewelry, every little trinket that had once meant something to us now felt tainted. Emily came into the room, her voice quiet but desperate. Jason, please. Don't do this. We can still fix it. I didn't even turn to look at her. No, Emily. There's nothing left to fix. You made sure of that. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but I was beyond caring. I was numb. She had destroyed everything we built, and now she had to face the reality of it. There was no going back. After filling the bags, I tossed them by the front door, one after another. Emily followed me, her voice a broken whisper, trying to plead with me, trying to bargain. But I was done. This was the end, and she knew it. Take your stuff and go, I said, my tone flat. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. Jason, I don't have anywhere to go, she whimpered, her voice barely audible. What am I supposed to do? Figure it out, I replied coldly. Maybe Chad will take you in. Oh, wait. I forgot. His wife's kicking him out too. Her face twisted in horror as the reality of what I had done sank in. Chad wasn't going to be her savior. He was probably drowning in his own mess, thanks to the bombshell I had dropped on his wife. Emily had bet everything on Chad, and now they were both left with nothing. You're a monster, she spat, her tears turning into anger. You've ruined everything. I looked her dead in the eyes, no emotion left in me. No, Emily. You ruined everything. You cheated. You lied. And now you have to live with the consequences. You can cry all you want, but I'm done. This is over. She stormed out, grabbing the garbage bags filled with her things, and stumbled out of the house. I watched as she threw the bags into her car, slammed the door, and sped off. The sound of her tires screeching as she left felt like the final punctuation mark on the end of our marriage. And just like that, she was gone. The next few days were strange. The house felt empty, but not in the way it did when Emily was around. This was different. This was the kind of emptiness that felt like freedom. The kind where I could breathe again. The kind where I didn't have to second-guess every little thing. I won't lie, there were moments where it hurt. 12 years with someone doesn't just disappear overnight. But the anger, the betrayal, the lies, they made it easier. Every time I thought about those texts, those plans she made with Chad behind my back, I remembered why this needed to end. Why she didn't deserve another chance. On the following Monday, I filed the divorce papers. It felt surreal walking into that office, signing away the last ties to a life I thought I was building with someone I loved. But at the same time, there was relief. I was starting over, and I knew I wasn't the one who had done wrong. A few days later, I got a call from Jenny, Chad's now ex-wife. We met up for coffee, not as some kind of romantic rebound, but because we had both been through the same hell and needed to talk. She told me how Chad had tried to deny everything, but the evidence I had given her left him no room to squirm. She was divorcing him, just like I was divorcing Emily. It was almost poetic how both of them ended up with nothing. You know, Jenny said, stirring her coffee slowly, it's amazing how they thought they could just throw us away like that. Like we wouldn't find out. I nodded. They thought they were so smart, sneaking around behind our backs. Guess they didn't count on us being smarter. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing everything. I couldn't help but wonder how I had missed the signs for so long. But then again, love makes you blind sometimes. It makes you trust people who don't deserve it. Before we parted ways, Jenny gave me a small smile. You'll be okay, Jason. You deserve better than what she gave you. You too, I said, offering her a nod. We both deserve better. That night, as I sat in my now quiet, Emily-free house, I realized something. Emily and Chad hadn't just ruined their marriages. They had ruined their lives. And they had no one to blame but themselves. They were the architects of their own misery, and now they had to live with it. Me? I was free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal, and free to start over. Sure, it wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would be long, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let what Emily did define me. I was stronger than that. As I sat there, sipping a beer and watching a game on TV, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I had been through hell, but I came out the other side stronger. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that walking away from a toxic relationship is always better than staying and letting it destroy you. If there's anyone reading this going through something similar, take it from me: don't stay where you're not respected. Don't let someone treat you like an option. Know your worth, and don't be afraid to walk away. Because in the end, the only person who can protect your happiness is you. And trust me, there's life after betrayal.